This is Money Talk Radio, and I'm Ellis Martin. Join me now for a conversation with Ken Konkin, the president and CEO of Tudor Gold. Tudor Gold trades on the TSX Venture Exchange as TUD, and in the U.S. on the OTC as TDRRF. The company's Goldstorm project in British Columbia, Canada's Golden Triangle, represents one of the largest gold discoveries in the past 30 years. Tudor has identified a staggering mineral resource of 27.9 million ounces of gold equivalent, 2.87 billion pounds of copper, and 128 million ounces of silver. The 17,918 hectare Treaty Creek property, in which Tudor Gold holds a 60% interest, borders the KSM property to the southwest and the Brucejack mine to the south. The past producing SK Creek mine lies 12 kilometers to the west. Mr. Konkin has over 35 years of geological experience throughout North and South America, as well as Russia. Ken Konkin worked for Silver Standard for 19 years and managed advanced exploration programs in Argentina, Peru, as well as the Golden Triangle in British Columbia, Canada. Mr. Konkin was appointed the project manager for Pretium Resources after it purchased the Snowfields Brucejack project from Silver Standard in 2010. Subsequently, he was instrumental in the discovery of the Valley of the Kings deposit at the Brucejack Lake Mine, an 8 million ounce gold deposit currently in production. Ken, welcome back to the program. Great to visit with you today.
Great to have me back. Great to see you again there, Ellis, for sure.
I'll tell you what, a very impressive assay results and intercepts with gold at the Treaty Creek property with the supercell. We've got about 19 grams per ton, 21 grams per ton of gold equivalent. You've struck gold, haven't you?
Yeah, those were the initial pathfinders for the success of this program specifically. Discovery actually goes back to right after Christmas when we started looking at things that didn't make sense outside the box, things that we hit that didn't sound like a porphyry style or intrusive related value. So we studied it and came up with an idea that we had a supercell. And with that, we used our flow-through money to go after it. And to my surprise, we did confirm supercell 1, but realized there's 3 components, 1A, 1B, and 1C. So very good news going forward that we have this great high-grade system lurking at Goldstorm.
You keep your expectations pretty level, and you just said you were surprised. So your expectations are a little bit lower?
We don't measure the expectations of what you go forward seeing because it never is what you think it is. You start painting a tiger and you get a dragon. I mean, it's never an easy thing with exploration, but the big takeaway is we had teasers all our history of drilling. 2020 is a good example. Just to give your listeners what it takes in a gold area like a Archean gold belt in Red Lake, well-known area. About 1 hit out of every 20 drill holes will have native gold. In 2020, we had 49 drill holes and 10 had visible gold in it. And that to me was surprising because a typical porphyry system doesn't really show up as having native gold in it in the way it's visible. So when you sit there and break it down, having a percentile of over 20% success ratio of drill holes, you're not targeting structures that have gold and you're clipping them on the way. It tells you that you have another system lurking that you haven't targeted. So we ignore that by way of going after the optimization of fleshing out the size and body consistency of the aforementioned 300 domain, 300H, the CS 600, the copper stream 600, a pivotal point. In 2021, when we attacked it, it came in with almost 3 billion pounds of copper. Huge difference. Now, after this analysis in early 2024, we decided to test the theory. Let's take the shot. Let's see if that supercell works. And it wasn't exactly as I envisioned in my mind. I thought this was an upper contact to a supercell overprinting or being part of an enrichment of an upper contact of a domain of copper stream 600. And when we shot it, we were amazed that the hits happened well away from the nebula. So think of it this way in the cosmos, as you will. Think of a nebula with sheet lightning ripping through it. So the lightning emanates from within the nebula and extends outward. Well, we clipped the outward portions to it at structures that were superimposed or late stage to the intrusive related or porphyry style mineralization. This is a part does not include, and none of our ounces included this, because all those aforementioned 21 gram, 19 gram, we have a long history of having high grade. were never included because we clipped that at 8 grams. We typically constrain obviously this is a huge conservative approach, but it's the way we take it. We constrain the deposits to basically reflect the maximum gold you would get in a pork, but we put it at 8 grams. Now, 8 grams happens to be the average grade of Bruce Jack Lake, a deposit I know extremely well, being there for umpteen years, 7 years as manager of that project. And that, to me, was significant that we saw these rays or these sub-parallel structures emanating from the nebula of Goldstorm. So that deposit, late stage, produced a series of high-grade targets that we are now actively chasing.
So are you on the fringe right now, or you still have a long ways to go to hit the center of that nebula?
We don't know what we're going to do. Like a good exploration is go from known to unknown. So when we actually, the nebula I refer to is the deposit. So within the core of the deposit itself, when we actually analyze this, I've given instruction to our technical team to start chasing everything over 8 grams, anything over 10, anything over 12, et cetera, to see if those points line up with planes. Because typically the old interpretation was that you just have this ubiquitous distribution, like my example of 49 drill holes, 10 having native gold. Well, if you look within the nebula of the deposit, within this monstrous body, it's pretty hard to connect the dots. So which way would you go? You have so many of them. However, when you're out from the mineralization, you have this clear structure, a nice fine breccia that's a hydrothermal event that contains native gold. And the nice thing is, it is a very fine dusting. It's not a coarse nuggety thing where that's why at Red Lake they do have a nugget effect. And that's why they actually drill for structure, mine for the grade. So they go after it knowing that they've got a deposit. They just have to basically be patient with it. 1 hit out of 20. We were getting 10 hits out of 49. So hence a little better than 20% success ratio. And that continued. And tell me this, how lucky am I or how good am I to set up a project and to have the very first hole? Now you're sitting there in a machine the size of your living room. It's a powerful hydraulic machine with a bit the size of an outside diameter is almost 6 inches on the outside, but the important part is the inside diameter. You want to core that with HQ. If you're deep enough, it's NQ. It's a smaller diameter, but notwithstanding, it's over 2.5 inches in diameter core you're extracting. The goal here is the challenge, or the attempt is like a sniper. You're going to go after a grain of gold, anywhere from the size of a pinhead to, say, the size of a grain of rice. And what you're going to do is on the inside gauge only, grind that rock away till it exposes the gold on the outside of the core and extract that up a core tube with a wire line, present it to the geologist, geoscientist on the outside of the core to show, yes, you hit native gold from 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800 meters away. What a shot. Tell me how you can reproduce this. We reproduce this with every hole we went through. Tells me we're not that good. We're not that lucky. Tells us there's a lot of gold down there. So we going through, catching the fine dusting of these basic dusting of gold within discrete structures that run anywhere between 5 meters to 25 meters in width. Very, very outstanding geological discovery.
You know, you're giving us quite a technical analysis, which I actually can understand, and I think most of our audience can get. When you have above a 20% success rate in finding high grade, is it the geology or the team, the technology, or a combination of all three?
No, I have a theory. Geo gods must smile upon you. You've got to have the tenacity and the ability to recognize what doesn't fit. What's wrong with this picture? It's like the discovery of the Goldstorm deposit. If you look at it, it's the frequency, it's the outlay. If you're off of 500 meters, you're on the fringes, you're not going to find it. As big as it is, it's amazing how we hunted the Snowfields deposit and we had different zones. One was called the SF, Snowfield Zone. The other one was called Mitchell Zone. Nobody in their right mind would have thought 1.4 kilometers away would connect back to the same deposit. Nobody. And it did. The characteristic was different too. There's copper in the Mitchell Zone, but it is the Snowfields deposit. It had a characteristic change. So when I mentioned go from known to unknown, you have to believe in one thing, that in every deposit, it's a question of how big is it going to be to make a mine. So when you talk about terms of economics, what's the economic significance of finding high-grade gold? When you're sitting there looking at 27.87 million ounces or 27.8 million ounces of gold equivalent already, people looked at us like madmen were drilling. What they didn't understand is when I see the assay sheets, when I see the fact, the distribution of these centers, these high-grade, these emanating structures that carry gold, knowing that we didn't count anything past 8 grams, nor do we carry it through the structure as a competent material running beyond 5-meter pixels. So we gave it a 5-meter pixel at 8 gram. That's all we gave it. That's it in space. That's all it counted for. So when you put it together as a plane, now you can say you've got some volume. So our geological volume is 6 million tons. 6 million tons of geological target we're looking for just outside this nebula deposit. Now, if you reach inside, pull that thread and keep unraveling, I guarantee you're going to see other high-grade hits we couldn't explain other than these supercell 1A, supercell 1B, supercell 1C, maybe is a D, E, and F. This is, no doubt about it, a subparallel pulse of late-stage mineralization, gold dominant, but it does have characteristic changes where it introduces silver, it introduces some copper, heavy copper. The copper we see is typically 0.3%. How do you get 5% copper in a structure? Well, that's a late-stage event. That's not related to the porphyry. It's something after. So when you see these things, you try and imagine what you've got, but you've got to react to it and then make it predictable. If it's not predictable, it's not mineable. If you can't see it forward and step out, let's say 100 meters, 150 meters in front of it, drill it again, well, it could be faulted off. It could just pinch out. It could be an echelon. But the key is you've got to test the theory. You've got to be brave, take the shot. So that's what we've done. So we'll watch and see what happens with other following press releases and intercepts. Did we clip it again? If we have, then we're off to the races. We have a starter point for this deposit. It is a capex killer because the capex on a little, well, shouldn't say little, 1,000 tons a day is not little for underground. This is a large feature. It's not small. It pales in comparison to the size of Goldstorm. That is true. However, Goldstorm deposit is probably the largest discovery in the last 30 years. Now, when we break it down, we want to have a starting point to pull back the threads and to go into the center of mass of the nebula, which is where the fluids emanated from to create this deposit. We need to go back to source. When you go back to source, grades typically go higher. And we have grades we cannot explain as high as an ounce in the middle of this Goldstorm, and we'll specifically CS 600 and 300 horizon domains. Those two specifically have these features, these sheets of lightning, if you will.
And I encourage our listeners right now to go to tudor-gold.com and download, take a look at that release dated August 13th of this month, and you'll see what Ken's been talking about. Anybody can see that. Ken, $2,500 per ounce US for gold right now. Huge disparity between the commodities and the equities. This is a time where people are going to be looking for gold opportunities.
Absolutely. The big thing that I always sit there and tell people, where were you in 2006 when we discovered, say, snowfields, or where were you in 2010s when I Valley of the Kings, when that thing took off? Where were people sitting, waiting, thinking, well, maybe let's just see? People tend to wait too long. Get in early, get in before the rush happens, and people tend to buy too far up the ramp and they miss out. So that's the one common mistake that people make. You've got to recognize the opportunity. Mr. Eric Sprott did that. He came in early. So that's the typical optimist that actually does win on plays like this. So this is something that will, in my opinion, be one of the biggest kind of sleeper discoveries in our own backyard here in a geopolitical safe arena, the heart of the Golden Triangle. I mean, what a better set of real estate with the KSM deposits next to us, north of the Bruce Jack Lake mine, the richest underground mine in Canada right now, and is the third largest gold mine right now in Canada. So having all these factors come to us with a simple connection of 17 kilometers to a road with power line that Seabridge is bringing in, we're not paying for it. So it just has a bright, bright future.
Ken, you've clearly got some of the best passion I've seen in the sector. Where does it come from?
Funny you mentioned that. I think it's something that every explorationist has to have. And it doesn't get old with me when you see native gold. What you are is you're a talisman. You're like an interpreter for the rocks. So what you do is you get energy from the deposit and you try and get that out there in the least amount of words possible so you don't overwhelm the public with too much technical data. But my aspect of it, I describe it as when you see native gold at that example I gave you is trying to snipe a grain of gold the size of a pinhead and have it extracted from 800 meters, 600 meters below, and to see it visibly on the outside of the core. Physiologically, your heart skips a beat, literally. It's like being in love for the very first time. Just your body goes through a physiological change. You cannot wipe the smile off your face. It's like hitting the best Thai salmon. It's like having the best day in your life every time you see it. So for me, that cannot be curtailed. And that's what every basic explorationist should have as their basic requirement in their toolbox of tricks of taking out stick, stay, and make it pay, and have a tenacity and adaptability. Those words don't work well together, but that's what's required. And to come out on top at the end of the day.
Well, Ken, you put a smile on my face for sure. We've got another 4,000 meters of drilling results to be seen, to be had. When can we expect to talk to you again?
Well, as soon as the labs get through it, and it's always that human factor, you get the Matterhorn effect of samples piling on samples. So my latest samples got received on the top, and they're the ones that say maybe midway through a hole that gets taken out of sequence. It happens. I mean, even in slow times when they don't have staffing. So we hope to have it in, say, 2-3 weeks. I hate to beat labs up, but it's always a constant struggle. I think we'll never eradicate that issue unless you get a yard the size of, well, think about the real estate it would take to hold a core for an entire hole of 1,200 meters, right? So you've got this 1 ton of rock going out a day in samples. So you think about what it takes. So I would say next 2 weeks. I would just guess 2 weeks, depending on labs, but we do let it out once we get it, once it actually makes sense to us. If we need to hold back a number, is to wait to see if a number hits and supports it. It's very important not just to throw out something that you can't explain or never could explain. And that's equally conservative, but it's important that you don't over promise and under deliver. And that's the one thing that this project has done. It's delivered each and every time. So I'm very proud of it, proud of the technical team we've got.
Well, Ken, thanks so much for chatting with me today. I've enjoyed our interview, and I look forward to our next one in just a couple of weeks.
Great to see you again, Ellis. We'll keep you updated as soon as we can. Thank you. Cheers.
I've been speaking with Ken Konkin, the president and CEO of Tudor Gold. Tudor Gold trades on the TSX Venture Exchange as TUD, and in the U.S. on the OTC as TDRRF. The company's website is tudor-gold.com. I'm Ellis Martin, and this is Money Talk Radio.